Greeting friends, greeting colleagues and associates. We met through the corridors of knowledge seeking. Others we met in spaces of conferences and workshops in the line of work. It is afternoon in South Africa, so that allows me to say good afternoon. My name is Mokgopana Ramasubana, and I work as a researcher, I work as an evaluator. I'm inquisitive about the challenges of Africa, and more so committed to contributing to how best we can resolve these challenges and live in a thriving and a prosperous Africa. Today marks a special day in my personal life. I am thrilled to be making this recording. It is because today marks a long-standing dream of mine that came from childhood, is almost being realized, and I'll share with you as part of the background of what I'm talking about. Suffice to say that today is a launch of Decolonization Conversations podcast, a thinking, an approach that has been long coming, and I think I want to approach this recording in three ways. One is that I will explain who I am and where I come from, and the second aspect is that I'll talk to what is decolonization conversation and why the decolonization conversation podcast. And then I'll end with some of the conversation that are planned, and then appeal that you as a viewer, you as a family, you as a subscriber, what will be our request from your end. As I said, that my heart is filled with joy. My heart is overwhelmed to see that this dream of mine is finally coming to light. If I were to give you almost 3-4 years ago, this idea came to mind. The ideation of this idea was born. But it is only today that it has been given birth. I promise that I'll answer the question about who am I. As mentioned, my name is Mokgopana Ramasubana, is my surname. My name is inherited from my grandfather. In my Pedi culture, a son, a firstborn of a son, names his children after his father. And that explains how I inherited the name of my grandfather, who I was very close to. I come from a village in the Limpopo province, a village situated between both Mokopane and Polokwane, which are the towns in that part of the world. The village is about 50-55 kilometers, depending on which town you're coming from either Polokwane or Mokopane. In actual fact, I was born in the hospital, Mokopane Hospital, and I lived in this village, Ramatlala, and my chief is Matlala. If you noticed, if you go in that part of the world, it will be Raselolo, it will be Ra, which is indicative of who is the chief or the king of the area. My village is in Kumishe, which is a subset of the Ramatlala. It is this village where I was born and bred and raised. Interestingly, my basic education life is informed, is really defined by by this village. From my crash life, or what is often these days referred as early childhood development, I studied that village. I walked the streets of my village up until I matriculated. I knew less about the other cities because I've always not liked to visit people. So most of what I know, most of my formative years can be related, can be drawn from this village. One thing that is important about that village is that my surname is Ramasubala. With most African countries, we do know that migration was a big feature of the colonization era. In the case of South Africa, because of the apartheid system, a lot of economic activities happened, as it's often probably still the case now, happened in the urban areas. Therefore, my parents were preoccupied with providing for us as children. For both my mother, Madinti, and my father, Puti, were in the city of Johannesburg, searching for this gold so that me and my brother can be able to survive. This therefore meant inherently my grandmother was responsible for raising us up. And I'm sharing this because it links to today's launch. That very same grandmother instilled quite a number of virtues that I aspire and attempt to espouse. To start with, my grandmother taught me about equality. I did not know what it means then, but she was an advocate, an activist for treating each and every human being in the village and the surrounding areas with equal treatment. One of the things I was responsible for when I was a young boy until my matured age is that I was responsible for preparing rooibos tea for my grandmother, breakfast, lunch, and supper. It was also my responsibility that when visitors visit our home, I needed to either prepare the very same rooibos or offer them something to drink. That was my responsibility. One thing which fascinates me about my grandmother was that, and this speaks to the point around equality, is that her extension of kindness was offered to each and every person despite their ranking or their hierarchy in life. So she treated everybody the same, and the extension of service to visitors or people around us, our neighbors, was exactly the same. And I was responsible, fortunate in my formative years, to learn about equality. And I saw it being practiced by my grandmother. Another important aspect of the village linked to my grandmother is that a medium of communication, a medium of knowledge sharing was the radio, the power of radio. And I would listen through the radio with my grandmother. As time would permit, I would go into my room and do a similar thing that I'm currently doing through this podcast. I will have a show which I hosted with a number of guests on different topical issues. This will be an imaginary radio show, and to its credit, the radio was quite helpful in creating imagination and reimagination in my own mind. And I would sit there and share those shows with my grandmother. I must emphasize, at no given time has my grandmother said to me, in any ideation I had, said to me, it is not possible. Hers was to say, go for it, my boy, it is possible. It is a pity that my grandmother is not here to see the reality of those imaginary shows I had with myself and I shared with her. It is unfortunate that my grandmother passed away almost 2 decades ago. And a lot of the things I imagined, a lot of the things I dreamed about, she's unfortunately not here physically to see those becoming realities. But I'm grateful and thankful to her for nurturing, for molding and creating an inquisitive mind that I have. Linked to where we are today, and please be patient with me before I go to the essence, the business of the day. That mind that was inquisitive, also when my grandmother was alive, it is the mind that always allowed me to question why some of my neighbors did not have shoes, why they could not afford bread, why things were not equal. Why is it that there are those who are poorer and those who seem to live in abundance? These are questions that I probed even when I was younger. And my grandmother would try and discuss this with me, would have a conversation about these issues. So today is a culmination of a conversation I had with my grandmother, trying to ask big, complex questions. And I tried throughout my career to do as little or as much as possible to make sure that I fight, I foster for a life that's free, that's just, and that's fair. Credit to my grandmother. So in my career, when I was involved in the monitoring and evaluation space, and maybe few of you know me in that very area, I've always asked questions that I was a little bit uncomfortable with. Amongst many of those questions was, why is it that when a lot of resources are invested in this continent through aid to support the work of evaluation or monitoring and evaluation, institutionalize it, embed it within governments and institutions based in Africa. But the question that bothered me and continues to do so is, why is it that this investment don't culminate, don't result in a changed Africa, an Africa that's developed? This then links us to the earlier questions about what is and why the Decolonization Conversations podcast. It is an attempt really from my end to try and answer that question around, if colonization was never the case in Africa, how would Africa look like? And how can we decolonize the current discourse, the current practices, I must say, in the different fields of work to ensure that that Africa that we all aspire for, the Africa that our ancestors dreamed about, Nyerere, the Africa that Kwame Nkrumah dreamed about, it becomes feasible. So this, in terms of what is decolonization conversation, this is a platform where Africans, mostly Africans, would be presenting their thoughts, would be presenting their ideas, they'll be presenting their aspirations, or their concrete, their empirical evidence on how best can we take Africa forward. The type of people we talk to comprises of younger researchers, younger learned African people. It comprises of established scholars, well-renowned, globally recognized researchers. It also talks to people who are involved in the various fields, either as academicians, as practitioners, and ordinary people who are interested in changing Africa and who are embedded, preoccupied with an Africa that's prosperous. So that is me trying to answer the question of what is Decolonization Conversation Podcast. It's really a platform where we facilitate a conversation to answer very deeply thought questions, trouble, but with an end goal of providing some of the solutions, as well as thinking about what could work and why that could work in the African continent, and our over-reliance on decolonization as a methodological approach to freeing Africa from the disentanglement of the underdevelopment. The other question was why, or what are the objectives of the podcast? To start with, at an entry point, we seek to build or heighten awareness on the importance or significance of decolonization debate. We do so in theorizing, in bringing some of the experts that can help us to theorize, some of the experts that can help us to pragmatically apply some of the tools that could help us to see an Africa that's free. That's more at an awareness building phase. Second to that, we intend to demonstrate or illustrate the role or the contribution of African knowledge system within the broader knowledge systems. That knowledge is not geographical, knowledge is global, and Africa's knowledge is also knowledge equivalent or at par with any other knowledge system that may exist. So this is really around ensuring that we create the equilibrium and equity on the knowledge system. Thirdly, we intend to illustrate some of the homegrown approaches, some of the endogenous knowledge approaches that emanate from this continent, but not limited to this continent. They originate from this continent, but they're applicable to the entire world. I think that's one of the things that the podcast aims to present and to demonstrate. Fourthly, it's really a knowledge sharing base, a network platform wherein we can tap into each other's knowledge, into each other's networks, to give space for other African people that may not be available within our radar or my radar as a podcaster. Therefore, it's really around knowledge sharing, networking. This therefore means that we rely a lot in your recommendations in terms of which other people we should be talking to, which other persons we should invite to engage with us on this podcast. And we're looking forward to your recommendation. We're looking forward to some of the people that you work with that could contribute immensely to this conversation. Lastly, it was really just around, it's really about the point that I just raised about networking. We hope to have conversations with scholars such as Professor Bagale Chiliza, who's well known for her thinking and deep thinking around decolonization, around particularly in the health and education, as well as the monitoring and evaluation space. She will share with us how to reform, how to transform the current thinking to shift into appreciating indigenous knowledge system or indigenous knowledge system from Africa. We also will talk to African Evaluation Association as an umbrella body, a custodian of ensuring that monitoring evaluation is institutionalized across the continent and is useful thereof towards advancing the development of the continent. And we hope to speak to Dr. Miche as the president, who's the current president of AFREA, to share, or even the CEO, to share their thoughts at a continental level. A good friend of mine, Professor Mjiva Vryhowart, who's the current editor of African Evaluation Journal, would look forward to talking to her. We also look forward to talking to some of the young emerging evaluators who whose thought are quite important, considerably because they will have to hand over the baton to them to run the race of these conversations. We've also talked to Professor Francis Mwaijande, who's based in Tanzania, to talk about, as a senior lecturer, to say what does decolonization look like in the classroom in preparing the minds and the thought, the consciousness of students. He'll take us through that. Importantly, we've got friends in the globe. To think of few, my friend Professor Tom Archibald, who has produced quite a number of PhD students coming from Africa, who's based at the University of Virginia in the US. We looked forward to having a conversation with him. There's also some of his students, and one of them is Dr. Omosa, who has produced, who kind of like was helpful in defining Made in Africa evaluation as a construct to give it a definition. In the Canada, we hope to speak to some of the colleagues there who have been working in the space. I mean, Canada and Australia have been quite involved in decolonizing and what it means for them. And so we're going to borrow quite a lot from those colleagues elsewhere. We also want to speak to sectoral experts who might be involved in education to share with us how does decolonization look like in their own spaces, and what are some of the pragmatic elements, what are some of the tangible elements that we could borrow and apply. Because we do know of the criticism that we're still more at the theoretical level. We have really critiqued the dominance of Western knowledge system in sort of suffocating our own knowledge systems. But I think it's about time we also kind of like infuse the practical elements of this discourse into the broader debates. So one of the things we'll also try and do is to share recommendations of things to read, things to consider, and so on. And this is for the reason that I have these two books. So it's titled Reimagining Pan-Africanism. It was written by Wole Soyinka as the main writer, Harbes Elise, Mugo, and Mkandawire. And It's for It was written by Isa Shivji. And I think this is a culmination of debates, lecturers by Julius Nyerere from 2009 to 2013. So this books talks about how do we reimagine Pan-Africanism and its contribution to the broader knowledge system, its contribution towards liberating Africa from this disentanglement of imperialism, neocolonialism, and how we should be careful of a newly dressed colonization, but subtle and more subtle as opposed to aggressive, colonialism in Africa. And this is an interesting book, and I enjoyed it. Coming a little closer to home, in the case of South Africa, we do know that land is part of an important conversation that needs to be had, land ownership especially. So Advocate Thembeka Waitobi, who's well known in the legal rooms of South Africa, wrote a book titled The Land is Ours. Its title says South Africa's First Black Lawyers and the Birth of Constitutionalism. So yes, these are the two books that we may consider reading. So as we go, we would want to also gather some of the recommendations in terms of the books that we should be written that are useful in us deepening, understanding, growing our knowledge around decolonization. So, colleagues, this is the essence of this recording. It is just purely introductory. It is intended to lay the foundation for the forthcoming recordings, discussion, conversations, fire, community circles. We use community circles. Of course, it might not be possible, but I think those are the essence of the conversations we want to disseminate. But what is important is that we would like to have your views informing these conversations. I think I've shared the genesis and the rationale behind why this podcast. But I think it would be a dream of mine that my wish is that all of you who would subscribe to this podcast will start feeding us with some of the aspects that we should look at. All of us have blind spots. But when we are together as a people, together as a community, we can achieve more. I must also say that in terms of just some of the administrative issues, is that you would notice that our work is not perfect. Our work has a lot of loopholes, but I think we aspire to perfect as we go. I'm not an expert in videography. I'm not an expert in this, and there's not much resources that's invested in this. But I must tell you, I invest a lot of my time to make sure that the products that gets produced is of quality. So please bear with us if we flop along the way. Please give us a lot of grace, and I hope that at some point we'll be able to produce and provide a very top of the range type of recordings, top of the range podcast. But I think, having said so, what I can promise on my end is that the conversations are going to be intriguing. The conversation are going to enrich the debate. The conversations will be quite fruitful. We'll try as much as possible not to make long recordings, so that we know that you are quite busy. But we look forward to meet you in the streets. We urge you to like, follow, subscribe, share the Decolonization Conversations podcast. We would like to get your comments. We'll read them. We'll dedicate time to read through them, and they will inform or guide this podcast moving forward. Thank you so very much for your audience. I'm thrilled, once again, I want to mention that I'm so thrilled that a dream of mine as a young boy today is almost like a culmination of that dream. And this dream will only be possible if yourselves and the community, friends, associates, and everybody else would take time to look at our podcast, to review, to critique, to appreciate, to follow our work and make sure that our work makes sense. Thank you so much. I'm trying to avoid being emotional because this means a lot. This is a culmination of a long decades of work. Today I link that conversation I had privately with myself. I'm now becoming vulnerable. I open myself up to the world and I share some of my thoughts with the world. Thank you so very much for taking the time, and I look forward to intense engagement, productive engagement, enlightening engagement. And I say, a luta continua. Africa will be prosperous. Africa will succeed. A new baby is born today, decolonization conversation. And that baby, despite the realities of the constraints of entrenched imperialism, that baby sees the world where Africa thrives. In a context where geopolitics continues to enforce race theory. Today, that baby says to us, it is still possible for Africans to unite. It is still possible for Africans to think and critique. And Africans are capable, like any other human beings in the world. Africans are well poised to think, critique, apply solutions to their own problems. In a world where wars continue to show us that race matters, race is an issue to the lens at which we look at the world. The world where domination and extractive nature of resources and dominance around the economic cluster. The world where it is quite easy to be dejected and to give up. This baby today seeks to say, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah's blood, their belief system continues to shape us, continues to guide us as African people. I thank you. See you in the next episode.